Now that we've seen how the chaotic beginning and Sabbath end of the creation story explain the true nature of what God was doing for Israel through Moses, we should look briefly at some of the elements of the middle portion of the days of ordering in Genesis chapter 1 verse 3 through 31. How did Moses link the days of creation to his ministry? There are many links between the days of creation and Israel's exodus, but we will look at only two of these. First, the connections with the deliverance from Egypt, and second, the goal of possessing the Promised Land. In the first place, in delivering Israel from Egypt, God displayed the same kind of power he demonstrated in the ordering of creation in Genesis chapter 1. On one side of the picture, God reversed the order established at creation by sending plagues on the Egyptians. For example, rather than waters teeming with life as in the beginning, the waters of Egypt became deadly and the fish died when God turned the water into blood. Rather than humans having dominion over living things as God ordained in the beginning, frogs, gnats, insects, and locusts ruled over the Egyptians. The separation of light and darkness at the creation was overturned as darkness covered the land of Egypt, even during the daytime. And rather than the ground bringing forth vegetation, hail, fire, and locusts destroyed all the crops in Egypt. Rather than being fruitful and multiplying, both Egyptian animals and people died in large numbers. In these and many other ways, the curses on Egypt reversed the order God had established in the 6 days of Genesis chapter 1. During the time of the plagues, the land of Egypt truly regressed toward the primeval chaos. It's no wonder then that Moses summoned Israel to leave that place, calling it a formless, barren wasteland. Any Israelite who believed that life was good in Egypt had to reckon with Moses' creation account. Their experience in Egypt stood in stark contrast to the way the Egyptians themselves thought about their land. The Egyptians believed it was a land blessed by the gods, and apparently at least some Israelites had believed this as well. But Moses made it clear that Egypt had become the opposite of God's ideally ordered world. While this contrast with Egypt is plain enough, the 6 days of creation also had a positive correspondence to the deliverance from Egypt. While the Egyptians saw their land regress into the primordial chaos, the Israelites saw God ordering the world in their favor in ways that resembled the 6 days of creation. Their waters remained fresh and life-giving. They were not overrun by frogs and locusts. They enjoyed light while the Egyptians suffered in darkness. Israelite fields remained productive. Their animals were protected, and the Israelites multiplied while they were in Egypt. And more than this, in an astounding dramatic display of his control over creation, God held back the Red Sea and caused dry land to appear before the Israelites, just as it had appeared on the 3rd day of creation. The natural wonders God performed on Israel's behalf were not unprecedented. In many ways, they recalled the ways God ordered the world in the days of Genesis chapter 1. These correspondences between the way God ordered the earth in Genesis 1 and the way he delivered Israel from Egypt demonstrated to Moses' readers that God's work on their behalf paralleled his work of creation. In their exodus from Egypt, God reshaped the world as he had in the beginning. Not only did the deliverance from Egypt recall the days of creation, but the order which God established in the beginning also anticipated the way life would be in the land of Canaan. When Israel reached the land of promise, nature would be properly ordered with fertility and joy. This is why God called Canaan a land flowing with milk and honey. In addition to this, in the promised land, the Israelites would take the proper place of the image of God as it was established in the 6th day. Notice especially that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, God told the human race, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Although Israel had experienced some of this blessing even in Egypt, it was in the land of Canaan that God would afford Israel this honor in even greater measure. Under Moses' leadership, the Israelites were on their way to the place where they would fulfill this ideal position in the creation. Listen to what God promised would happen to the faithful Israelites in the land of Israel in Leviticus chapter 26, verse 9. I will look on you with favor and make you fruitful and increase your numbers, and I will keep my covenant with you. Here the allusion to Genesis chapter 1, verse 28 is obvious. God said in Genesis 1:28, "Be fruitful and increase in number." In Leviticus 26, verse 9, he said that he would make them fruitful and increase their numbers in the land. The land of Canaan would be like the wonderful world God ordered in the beginning. Canaan would be a place of natural harmony where the image of God would be able to fulfill its original role in the earth. We have touched only on a few of the ways the 6 days of creation connect to Israel's experience in the days of Moses. But we see from this sampling that Moses' record of how God ordered the universe in the first 6 days was not simply a report of what had happened at the beginning of time. He described the 6 days of creation in ways that helped his Israelite readers to see clearly what was happening in their own lives. Just as God had moved the cosmos from chaos to Sabbath by ordering nature in certain ways, God was taking Israel from the chaos of Egypt to Sabbath rest in Canaan by reordering the world on their behalf. We can only imagine the reaction of the Israelites when they heard Moses tell them about the creation of the world. They would have realized what was happening to them was no accident. By redeeming them from Egypt and taking them to Canaan, God was moving in the world as he had done in the beginning to bring an ideal order to the universe. Israel's salvation was a recreation, and they were to follow Moses into greater and greater experiences of that recreation.